Hey guys, I know it's been a while, but I'm back with a brand new video. Today I want to talk about the relationship between video games and roleplay games and wargaming, and how those other hobbies that all share the name game can feed in to one another. So without further ado, let's do this! Okay, so I said in the pre-credit that I was going to talk about the relationship between tabletop gaming, roleplay gaming, and video gaming. If I'm honest, this is probably going to take more than one video, so rather than trying to do an all-encompassing video today, I thought I'd focus in specifically on tabletop gaming and the relationship between Warhammer and the intellectual properties of Games Workshop and video games. Now, this is partly inspired because I've been playing a lot of Warhammer Total War at the moment, and also because the other day the cooperative gaming podcast came up in my recommended features, which, as I'm sure you know, was co-founded by John Bain, aka TotalBiscuit. Now, sadly, he's no longer with us, passed away earlier this year, but I was a fan of his. And it got me going down one of those lovely YouTube rabbit holes where I started rewatching some of his old videos, including the first video of his that I ever saw, which was his WTF is Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine. And I remember falling in love with that, A, because of how enthusiastic he was, and how much palpable joy you could hear in his commentary, but also in how awesome the game looked. Now, it's fair to say that Games Workshop properties ranging from Warhammer to Warhammer 40,000 and even things like Mordenheim and Space Hulk have all been at various points adapted into video games with a varying degrees of success. Some have been kind of disappointing affairs, like the console game Fire Warrior, which was based on a first-person shooter from the Tau perspective in Warhammer 40,000, through to much more successful ventures like the aforementioned Warhammer Total War and Space Marine. But what is it about tabletop gaming that and specific Games Workshop games that makes them so adaptable to video games? And I think it's the wealth of lore that those games have. Aside from the various rule sets and new models and new factions they're bringing, the overall game lore of Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 and the spin-off games that Games Workshop have produced is so rich that it lends itself really well to video games. There's so much lore that it just doesn't come up in your average tabletop gaming session. For instance, the complex interplays of the different factions within the Empire don't come up on a routine wargame. You just focus on your Empire army's got to fight that undead army or that goblin army, whereas you glimpse a bit more of that through Total War. Likewise, Space Marine allows you to explore quite how ridiculously badass a single Space Marine is, in a way that you can never convey in a tabletop game, because if you did, there'd be some significant balance issues. Games Workshop properties, they've got 20 plus years worth of writing behind them, and the big problem with roleplay games and with tabletop games is that they usually require at least 2 or more people and a few hours of your time. And it's difficult in a busy lifestyle that so many people have these days to find time to sit down and commit several hours to roleplay gaming or wargaming. Whereas video games allow you to just pick up whenever you want and really immerse yourself in. Also, because you're playing by yourself, you've not got to worry about balance issues within the party or within a wargaming environment. You can just focus on playing a game where you are the star, you are the focus. And as I said before, Games Workshop properties have been developed into a number of different games. Dawn of War was quite popular, but it's also had the criticism that for a strategy game, it feels at times like a clone of Command and Conquer with a Warhammer veneer or Warhammer 40,000 veneer painted over the top of it. Just imagine. Total War, Warhammer Total War feels a lot more fleshed out. Feels like a lot more lore. And whilst Total War has, for the most part, been historically based, now that they've started branching out away from that, I'd love to see a Total War science fiction game. Could you imagine a Total War game set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, perhaps based on Battlefleet Gothic, where you do ship-to-ship battles, but then you have raids onto your opponent's ships, and then it goes into a tactical thing where you're manning the internal defence, whilst the personnel and the infantry on the ship fight to repel borders. That would be pretty cool, right? I think there are a wealth of games that have yet to be adapted that you could do video games for. I would absolutely love to see Necromunda done in a video game format. Sure, you could do it as a generic first-person shooter, but I think Necromunda's real strength as a tabletop game is that idea of build your gang, level them up, and engage in different missions. So why not do that in a video game? Could you imagine having narrative-based plots with that, exploring the underhives of hive worlds in Imperial cities? Those would be really, really cool visuals to play with, some interesting terrain to play with, and also, the customization. Aside from the established gangs in the Necromunda lore, there's scope to do other things with that. I think, likewise, Gorka Morka was a short-lived spin-off game of 40k about stranded orcs on a backwards planet. Very Mad Max style, with lots of buggies and bikes and warring. I think, that could potentially have scope for a video game. Maybe the next, because they're talking about doing 3 installments of Warhammer Total War, maybe the next installment should include naval combat when you're travelling between the Old World and New World, and have ship-to-ship combat. A real throwback to a classic Games Workshop game that hasn't been made in probably 15 years now, maybe more, called Man of War, which was naval combat in the Warhammer universe. That would be really cool to see all the different factional ships. I think whether it's video games or role-play games or tabletop games, they have one thing in common, and that's that they fuel our mind. They're rich, vibrant worlds full of a lot of interesting things to explore in narrative. So it makes sense that, of course, you could, transfer one from the other. I'm sure if you wanted to do board game or role-play game adaptations of video games, you absolutely could. I know a lot of people that have. And when we talk about games and literally being beyond the dice, I can think of nothing more beyond the dice than actually playing it as a video game. And like I said, you don't have to then worry about waiting around for other people being available to game with. You have that luxury of doing it single player or doing it multiplayer online. That's an option. Imagine multiplayer games of Necromunda online, or multiplayer games. Well, Blood Bowl's already a thing because they have the Fumble League online, not to mention an actual Blood Bowl game for the console. So Games Workshop properties alone offer so many scope for video game options, and it stands to reason that they're far from the only one. So I'm going to do another video following on from this where I talk about roleplay games like D&D and their influence on things like Skyrim. Because there's a wealth of lore out there. And I guess whether your thing is to roll dice and game in person with your friends, or whether you don't always have the luxury to do that and you want to enjoy a video game, there's room to be both kind of gamers. I guess these days we accept that when somebody uses the term gamer, they're usually talking about video gamers. But sometimes they could be talking about being a roleplay gamer or a wargamer. And sometimes, just maybe, they're talking about any and all of the above. I know I am. So, yeah, I'd love to hear what you think would be cool adaptations of, well, I suppose for this video, Games Workshop properties that would make great video games. Leave some comments below and hopefully I can respond to them. Maybe even make a response video. And as I say, I'll be back with a second installment about video games and roleplay games and tabletop games soon. So tune in for that, guys. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to hear more about my views on video games, roleplay games, and, well, anything gaming related, you can subscribe. You can also subscribe to my general channel, which I'll just talk about anything nerdy, from video games right through to movies, you know, Disney, the Marvel movies, who knows? Anyway, I've rambled on long enough, but I'll see you guys soon.